And like the kids in Group A, who were praised for their intelligence, this time, the kids in Group B were told, "You've done really well, you must have really stretched yourself and put in a lot of effort. Good job." So simple and yet so very powerful. But what's the difference? Well, the moment that those children were praised for their intelligence in Group A, their attention, their focus was drawn towards something which is outside of their control. You see, you can't control your intelligence. You can only control what you do with that intelligence. You can only control the effort that you put into something. Your intelligence is relatively fixed. And even if you were to become more intelligent, it would only be through the effort of doing something to change that. So then, when they were given the opportunity to take on a harder challenge, they become resistant because they were scared that if they were to fail, they might lose that identity of being intelligent. Whereas the children who were praised for their effort, well, their effort was within their control. So simple, but again, so very powerful. One of the lessons I'd like you to take on board here is that one of the most powerful skills that you can ever gain is the ability to rapidly differentiate between the things which you can and cannot control. Your intelligence is beyond your control. Your past is beyond your control. You can only control the extent to which your past experience determines your future. Your parents are beyond your control. Your genetics is beyond your control. Even the thoughts and feelings that pop into your mind sometimes are beyond your control. You can only control how you choose to respond back to them. And the most important thing you can control is your focus, what you choose to focus on. And the most important thing to focus on is when you've stretched yourself. When you've put in effort, when you've taken a step out of your comfort zone, they're the most important things to focus on, and specifically to praise yourself in those moments. Do you remember back in the first session I told you not to wait until you have the perfect outcomes to give yourself permission to give yourself a pat on the back? And so perhaps now all the dots are starting to join. The pieces of the puzzle are all starting to come together now. There's a scientific basis behind this. And yet what do most people do? They look for outcomes. They look for results, things that are outside of them, rather than looking for the things that are on the inside. Let me give you an example related to therapy. When I was starting out, I was part of a mentoring group of other therapists. And this one therapist one time, she gave this story about a young girl who had come to her, about 18 years of age. And this client sat down in the chair, and the therapist said to her, "Okay, so what can I do to help you? What's going on for you?" And this young girl couldn't look her in the eyes, just sat down the whole time looking down and just started sobbing and crying, saying, "I'm broken, I need you to fix me." And the therapist, just for about half an hour, just kept trying to get something out of her, saying, "Okay, so what exactly is the problem? What can I do for you?" And after about half an hour or so, this didn't go anywhere. And so the therapist cancelled the session and reported back to us that that session had been a failure, okay, because they hadn't got any result. There was no outcome achieved. The only failure that day was that therapist's failure to recognise that if that poor young girl felt so uncomfortable about being there that day, then just imagine the effort. Just imagine how much of a stretch it was for her to even turn up to the session that day. She'd probably been wrestling with herself for months, if not years, about actually taking the steps to go and seek help. And when she finally did, rather than recognise what an enormous amount of effort she'd put in, that therapist made the mistake that most people make and was only looking for results. Now, don't get me wrong, the world out there doesn't care about your efforts. Okay, I'm going to be brutally honest. The world only cares about the results that you deliver. Okay, if you're a student, your teachers only care about your marks. If you're an employee, your employer only cares about the results that you can produce. If you've got your own business, your customers will only care about the results, the outcomes that you can deliver for them. Okay, so don't wait for the world outside to recognize your efforts. It won't. Okay, that's just the way the world is. The world will condition you with a fixed mindset if you allow it. You and you only can recondition yourself to develop a growth mindset. And that's why it becomes more important than ever to create that personal boundary, to separate the world's voice of criticism on the outside and instead create the voice of permission on the inside. I've employed hundreds of successful and educated employees. I expect results from my staff, and our clients expect results for themselves and for their children. I understand that you can't function successfully in the world unless you produce results. However, I like to think that in my position, I'm, for lack of a better word, wise enough to realize that the best way to achieve those results is to stop focusing on them and instead focus on what's going on the inside. Praise the efforts of the people around you, and most importantly, praise your own efforts. Because when you do that with repetition, eventually the results will come. The results are a natural consequence of praising the efforts and developing that growth mindset. If you do that with your staff, with your students, with your children, the results will come. The results are a natural consequence of doing that. It's just that most people get blindsided and they can't take their eyes off what the outcomes are long enough to be able to focus on the efforts instead. However, now you know better. Now you are that much wiser as well, and now you know the secrets to be able to achieve the same results for yourself. So yes, with therapy, a lot of people come along and say words to the effect of, I'm damaged, I'm broken, I need to be fixed. But the reality is, if you want to change, the only way is not to be fixed so much as to grow. You want to change anything, you need to grow out of the problem and grow into the solution. In fact, when you think back about that old problem that you used to be stuck on, that you're no longer stuck on, you know, the one where you've changed your thinking, changed your awareness, it feels different now. Well, isn't it true that it feels like that part of you has kind of grown up? Remember in the first session, I talked a lot about changing your thinking, changing what you focus on, changing how you respond. Well, now with a lot more specificity, you know exactly what to focus on, how to think, and how to respond. In order for you to have grown that part of your identity, there would have inevitably have been moments where you had to stretch yourself in some way. You had to face discomfort. You didn't have to, but chose to. And they are the moments that all contributed to the growth that's got you where you are now. So redirect your focus and look for them, because most people just overlook them. I teach my tutors, if a student is, you can see that they're really stretching themselves, they're putting in more effort, they are the key moments. Grab them, they are powerful, don't let them go. Okay, they're the moments that you pounce on. Focus on them, praise them, because they are the moments where if you praise them right and you grab them in the moment, they are the moments when all put together contribute to that growth mindset, and then the results will come later on. So if you think of a problem that you're stuck on now moving forward, realize that the only way to change is to grow your identity, to grow through the problem, to stretch yourself, praise yourself for the effort, and remember, in those moments when you're praising your effort, your inner child is listening. So what you tell yourself in those moments makes all the difference. Make sure you tell yourself the things that will make the difference that you want. So now that you know the first step in changing your identity, this is the next little exercise I'd like you to do. Let's take a fairly serious problem that you've been stuck on, okay? Something that you could never see yourself doing, but something that you'd very much like to be able to do. Something that would change your entire life if you're able to do this thing. And this time we're going to jump in that time machine, only this time we're going to go into the future. Now let's say, for argument's sake, it took up to, say, 10 years to get to that point where you have the life that you'd like to have, the ideal life where you can do anything that you'd like to be able to do that you currently can't. Okay? And by the way, if it sounds like that's too long, 10 years to get to the point where I want to be, that's way too long. Well, yeah, sometimes things take a long time, but here's an important thing I'd like you to keep in mind. And that is that time will pass anyway. Okay, if you're 40 now and you're going to be 50 by the time you get to the ideal life or whatever is relevant for you, well then, remember, you're going to be that age one day anyway. The time will pass irrespective. So you might as well take the steps and start to implement these changes now. But anyway, let's jump in that time machine, go into the future in 10 years from now. Okay? Now you've got the ideal life you've always wanted. You've grown into the person that you'd always wanted to be. What does it look like? What are you doing? Where are you doing it? Where are you living? Who are you with? What are you doing for work? What do you spend your time doing? What are you like as a person in 10 years from now, once you become the ideal person that you want to be? And most significantly, what does it feel like to be that person? Once you take a moment to think about that, let's now take a timeline. Okay, let's draw a timeline in between where you are now and where you'll be in 10 years from now. Now let's slice it up into 10 sections. Okay, 10 steps along the way before you get to that ideal point in time. Now let's go forward 9 years when you're 90% of the way there. So what does it look like? What does it feel like to be 90% of the way there? Now let's go to the 8-year mark. What are you doing? What is it like? What does your life look like when you are 80% of the way that you'd like to be? Now let's go to 7 years. Let's go to 6 years. Now let's fast forward 5 years. You're halfway there. What is life looking like for you when you are halfway to the point where you want to be? Let's bring it back to 4 years, 3 years, 2 years. What about 1 year? In 1 year from today, if you are 10% of the way there, what's life for you like at that 10% mark? What about at 6 months? What about at 3 months? For you to start this journey, what are the next few steps? Where would you need to be, or what would you need to do, or how would you need to start thinking to just get that ball rolling? Just start, just step out a little bit from where you are now and just stretch out that little bit extra further and get to that 3 or 6 month mark. Let's say if you were to do that in the next 24 hours, how would you think? How would you feel? What would you do that's different? So the first step to growing your identity and learning how to become the person that's doing the solution rather than the problem is all about how you learn to identify, focus on, and recognize those pivotal moments where you praise your efforts rather than the outcomes. But the second step is all about how you break things down, how you slice up time, and how you compartmentalize information in your mind. Ultimately, I think that has an even bigger impact on determining to what extent you move forward or stay stuck going around in circles. And that's something that I'm going to share with you in the next lesson. I'm going to show you some really cool mind hacks that'll show you how to break things up in a way that makes it literally impossible for your unconscious mind to resist. So once again, you are on the right track, and now you understand why it's so important to give yourself that permission to recognize the efforts that you're making. So well done, and I'll talk to you in the next lesson.
The world will always expect outcomes and results from you. If, however, you wait until you achieve outcomes before praising yourself, it will condition you with a fixed mindset. The key is to recognize each pivotal moment in time where you stretch yourself out of your comfort zone and take advantage of these pivotal moments by praising your efforts and your decision to stretch yourself, irrespective of the outcomes. Most importantly, practice developing the skill of letting go of the things beyond your control and instead practice redirecting your focus towards the things within your control. The most important things within your control are your willingness to put in the effort to stretch yourself, what you choose to focus your awareness on, when and how you decide to give yourself permission to praise yourself, as well as how you break down and compartmentalize information in your mind. In the next lesson, Stuart will show you some simple mind hacks which, when you put them into action, will make it impossible for your unconscious mind to resist taking on board the changes you want to grow your identity into.